Vince Guaraldi.
Vince Guaraldi.
Vince Guaraldi.
Vince Guaraldi.
Vince Guaraldi.
This time we watched Season 5, Episode 21, Santa Claus.
But first, follow-up. Coincidentally enough, 2 days after our episode dropped, which included a short about car safety from the 40s, a 99% Invisible episode dropped that happened to be on the same topic. So if you're interested in following up on this topic, episode 287, The Nut Behind the Wheel, actually explains how, for a very long time, car manufacturers resisted the call to make safer cars. They suggested that it was impossible to make a car safe, that is just the nature of the beast. To paraphrase it in a way that was very clever on the podcast, cars don't kill people, people kill people. And that is very much the attitude that was taken in the short, that you're just a bad driver. It has nothing to do with these death machines we've created. If you want to check that out, we'll have a link in the show notes.
Also of importance, Patreon, as you know, had recently announced some changes that they were going to actually extract extra funds from its donors and not giving it to the kind artists at work. If you pay attention to the fine print, you'll note that they were also owed donors blood and bones of future kin. Well, that's not happening anymore. For as little as the price of a cup of coffee, you can help donate to the production of this show. And for as much as the price of a non-fat half-calf latte, you can actually really contribute to the production of this show and help us pay little things like server costs and whatnot.
Indeed. If you've been enjoying our show over this last year, how about keep us going for another couple of years and chalk us in for a couple bucks? We'd appreciate it.
I mean, my God, there's no one else more deserving.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Well, should we get to this movie?
All right, and of course, as announced before, we watched Season 5, Episode 21, Santa Claus. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and up in the sky, Santa spies on each child with his all-seeing eye. The toys for good children are crafted with care by a sweatshop of child slaves, because the elf union's a bear. These young slaves make music and toys for their celestial betters, while Santa's face first in a bukkake of letters. On Earth, the dreams of the poor and the rich are entered by a fey demon named Pitch. But Santa conquers the demon, you probably guessed that, with the help of Merlin and a robotic cat. Putting Satan behind them, Santa has gifts for all. Rich kids get parents, poor girls get a doll. So Santa returns home, and we ask one and all, why does Saint Nick have a large mouth on his wall? The end.
In the host segments, the prologue began with a Christmas-themed episode. Mike and crew are getting ready to go caroling, but it quickly falls apart when Mike accidentally spills hot chocolate on Crow. In the next segment, a nearly bald Frank presents Dr. Forrester with a watch fob. In return, Dr. Forrester signs over a $25 savings bond that will mature in 30 years to $25? Anywho, the gift exchange on the Satellite of Love is more successful. Mike gives Crow a Steve Alamo album, Crow gives Tom the 1991 Drug IV handbook, and Tom embarrasses Gypsy by giving her a candy cane full of underwear. But the pièce de résistance is Gypsy's gift for Mike, a sweater that says Joikey. In segment 2, Mike and the Bots are Santa Claus, a stadium band, and guys, it's not very good. In segment 3, Crow and Tom surprise Mike by contacting his family, but turns out it's the wrong Nelson family. In segment 4, the gang is still in the mood for singing and present a lovely 90s PC carol for the holiday season. In the final segment, the crew are amazed to find that it's snowing outside the ship, and Mike declares it an official Satellite of Love snow day. Meanwhile, the Mads are fawning over Pitch, the pantaloon demon from the movie, until Santa shows up to kick his ass. Well, we finally did a Christmas-themed movie.
Just in time for Christmas. We did it. So this was one of your favorites, wasn't it?
Yes, I really love this movie. I think it's a lot of fun. The movie is bonkers, but it's also just really fun to look at. It's a really imaginative What was the movie we watched? Star Crash?
Yeah. Star Crash is the most Christmassy movie, even compared to this.
It has a very Star Crashy feel, and where you get the sense that this kind of unfettered creativity is on display. And I thought the jokes were all really, really sharp. And I was thinking about why the last movie we watched, which was King Dinosaur, why the jokes didn't hit me as much. And I think it was because, and this is what makes the difference between us in terms of preference for Joel versus Mike, the jokes just had a little bit more sharpness and edge to them. Like, they were a little bit mean. I like a little bit of nastiness in my jokes. And I think they did a really good job not making it too mean when you're dealing with a bunch of kids. But some of the laugh out loud moments for me will always be when Santa gets his sleigh started, where he cranks it up, and the very beautiful looking reindeer just starts slowly lurching forward, and Mike just goes, "Help us!" And then they all just start laughing maniacally when Santa, for some reason, just starts laughing a lot at their lurching. So I like how they keyed into the inner creepiness of this movie.
Yeah, I have to say, like, I've enjoyed this episode. I always considered it to be the silver place finalist in the MST3K Christmas specials, as I've always been a big fan of Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, which has like great sketches, memorable songs, a unforgettably bonkers movie. I loved this movie. I loved Santa Claus the movie. Not to be confused with the 1985 Santa Claus the movie with Dudley Moore and John Lithgow, which totally sucks, and was frequently on in my childhood home.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's terrible, though. John Lithgow, as always, nearly saves the movie with hamminess.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I generally consider this one to be pretty solid, but I could watch this movie on its own, and I was really happy that shortly before recording, I found a remastered version of both the Spanish and English versions, and it's gorgeous.
Oh, good con.
It still appears to be like a TV cut, but they cleaned it up because there's like a lot of fade-ins for commercial breaks, and I know this movie kind of rose to prominence with its frequent airings on, Mexican TV.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because, of course, this was filmed in Eastman color, which is a coloring process that degrades quickly. So I could tell that the reds were very vibrant, but everything else was kind of muted and a little bit muddy looking. So it would be interesting to see this in its original vibrancy.
Let me tell you something, having now watched it, is that it's like watching a Technicolor movie, but you're wearing pantyhose on your head.
Really?
It's super gauzy, yeah. But it's like this is a delightful movie, and and I enjoyed the episode. The host segments I don't think are great, and I think the Warrior Christmas moment is pretty cringy.
Yeah.
I think that's a really, really weak sketch, but it almost gets saved by the chemistry of Trace and Frank, who really sell the bit in the Deep 13 reaction shots.
I was going to say I don't know how they got Frank on top of Trace comfortably, but
movie magic. Also, how much does Frank look like Tor Johnson when he's in his bald cap?
A lot. I'm amazed they never did anything with that.
I'm surprised. Maybe they're afraid of hurting poor Frank's feelings, but to be compared to one of the greats and someone who he no doubt admires, like Tor Johnson, I think that would be great. But yeah, it's downright eerie, even though he keeps his little curl of hair. It is so shocking to look at him because I keep expecting him to say like Ferdinand or time for go to bed at any point. And that gift of the gift of the Magi joke at the very beginning is awesome. So there's a lot of good stuff in this episode, and I thought it was also pretty interesting in the way that they handled the aforementioned, I guess, meanness and potentially on-PC territory at the beginning of the movie by, to quote Arrested Development, "I'm being racist through my puppets." As you have Tom and Crow are the voice of stereotypes and mocking, and Mike is scolding them, which is very much like the Joel role when they get too mean. And I think that's really interesting, and this would only happen really early in Mike's run. Like, I don't think you would even see this next season had they done it in season 6 or season 7.
A couple times, but not in the same kind of parental feeling. I agree. This is still working from that assumption. And yes, it has a very Jeff Dunham-y kind of, I'm not saying it, my puppet is. But, the hardest stuff tends to hit towards, white ethnic stereotypes. So there's that, at least, in terms of, like, not people who have traditionally been marginalized in our culture. But they're pretty rough, and they're pretty nasty, and they're pretty, frankly, old.
Yes.
But I think that's probably part of the joke, is that they're not being very creative with, the English have rotten teeth, for instance.
Or the
or
we
the French
surrender
stink.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, or the we surrender. Yeah. Those are very, very old stereotypes.
Yes, they recently just discovered dentists in England.
No. Well, I think the joke was, like, based on the fact that they didn't fluoridate the water for a really long time in England. But, I mean, I don't know how you draw from that. Actually, one of the interesting pushbacks from that is that what they call American teeth have become somewhat unpopular in a lot of regions of the world. Like having two white teeth are referred to kind of derogatorily as American teeth because they don't look natural.
I support that because one of the things I love about watching even older TV is that you can see, like, in even unremastered TV episodes of things like Columbo or whatnot, is that you've got these great weird looking character actors with stains and pockmarks on their faces and whatnot, and it's great. You want to have actors who have character, and when you have identikit actors who all look like that guy who plays Mr. Grey in those fucking 50 Shades of Grey movies, you can't tell actors apart anymore if they're just generically handsome.
Well, to return to the Parade of Nations we get in this film, it's very interesting to see what countries were given more prominence, because sometimes you have the case where an entire continent, like, say, Africa, is given only the shortest of shrifts, where you go to Europe and particular nations are brought out. Obviously, that has to do with what was considered, the most important countries in terms of history and prominence in the 50s. But I was surprised that Mexico, considering their closeness to Latin America, would not spend a little bit more time bringing out, say, individual countries like Guatemala or Peru or something like that. But no, it's very Anglo, I would say, in its perspective on the prominence of nations.
Well, that being said, am I just blanking here, or was Australia completely absent, speaking of missing continents?
My guess was, since this was the 50s, they considered anything part of the Commonwealth to be basically UK territory.
That makes sense.
Which is maybe why they're like, the Orient, because at this point, India and Pakistan were kind of iffy, in terms of just having gained independence. So they probably were just like, let's not talk about that.
Yeah. Also, like, being born in the 80s and, that term was already fairly outmoded. When I was coming of age, whenever I hear the Orient, I keep expecting people to cut to pot noodles, because Mr. Noodle is the only time when using the word Oriental is appropriate.
What I found surprising, though, is they don't actually have Kids for England. They just have the London Bridge and sung very badly, and then a big shot of the entire toy/sweatshop, but no actual English kids or Mexican kids pretending to be English kids.
I was really hoping for a shot of, like, blatantly Mexican kids wearing top hats and canes.
Yeah, exactly. Because, like, the French, they put them in, like, I don't even know what to describe as, like, 18th century ringlets. Like, that was an interesting choice.
Yeah, I really expected a kid to wander out in a life-size baguette costume. Like like the French segment is borderline Flay the Concorde's Fudu Fafa. It is super, super stereotypical, but I think that's part of the quaint pleasures of this movie.
It's like Les Miserables cassette wear, basically.
Yeah, it's like being told of trips to foreign lands by your old uncle Roald Dahl.
Did you notice, like, who gets what toys?
Oh, you know what? I've long since forgotten. I just remember being so distracted by, like, the American kids dressed up as cowboys and how ridiculous that was.
They looked really confused why they were there. They were looking at each other to be like, do you know what the next line is about this what were they singing?
I really hope.
They're saying Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Right, yes,
and
they are.
And it was clear they did not know that song very well.
Yeah. Oh, man. But then
Probably because they weren't actually American kids, but...
Also, you just never want to focus on children singing. That's a thing that should be banned from all entertainment, including the children's pageants. Lip syncs are okay. Everything else, no.
I have a lot of friends who have kids in kindergarten now, so they're putting up a whole bunch of Christmas concert videos, and every time they're always like, "This is an adorable cacophony."
I take it that all of your fellow parent friends are now heavy drinkers.
I had one of the most painful but still really adorable renditions of the dreidel song that I've ever seen. Because they tried to do it in rounds, and it really fell apart quickly.
Oh, I thought you were going to say they tried to do it as a rap, which would have been amazing. Oh, my. We've talked a bit about how children are portrayed in this movie and other nations are portrayed in this movie. But weirdest of all is how Santa is portrayed in this movie.
Right. So at this time, 1959, Santa had not really bled into the Mexican celebrations around Christmas. It was still very much focused on the birth of Jesus and all of the pomp and circumstance around that, which you see a lot in this movie. There's a lot of altars. There's a lot of nativity scenes in this movie, a lot of angels. It's very much still focused on a celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ. So how do you fit Santa into all of this? Well, you gotta bend the rules a little bit. We're going to link in the show notes to an overview of this movie by the site 1000 Misspent Hours.
Yes, I've met the critic who runs that site, Scott Ashland. He's a great dude from Baltimore.
Oh, very cool.
Or, sorry, he's a great dude from Maryland. He's not necessarily in Baltimore.
And he points out that, when you have a myth coming into your culture and there's a lot of things that don't make a lot of sense, like, hey, how does Santa get into these houses, and why doesn't anybody ever see him, and those kinds of difficulties that people who grew up with it might not really think about too much. They had to find solutions to. So if you have a house that doesn't have a chimney, which I think might happen a lot in Mexico, you'll notice that all the chimneys in this are very walk-in size chimneys. He has a key that can open any door, and if you have kids that manage to stay up late and might sneak a look at old Kris Kringle, he has magic powder that will put them back to sleep. And if anyone else should manage to see him, he can render himself invisible with a flower.
Now, the flower part is new.
Mm-hmm.
That I haven't encountered, but was all part of the weirdly James Bondian Santa gadgets that he has.
Yeah.
Because essentially Merlin is his Q from Q Branch. But what I had experienced before, at least as a child, what I had been told about Santa, is that Santa did have magic powder that could put you to sleep and could turn invisible if you were awake. So that was actually something I was told as a child. I don't know if my parents were fond of the works of K. Gordon Murray, but I doubt it.
That's all new to me. Other things that they've kind of changed. He's not living in the North Pole. He lives on a cloud planet circling over the globe. And there's no elves or Mrs. Claus. There's some working children who may or may not have lived on Earth at any point in their lives. And a series of mechanical wonders to spy on everyone on Earth.
That's what I love, absolutely love about this version of Santa Claus, because Santa is equal parts Pee Wee Herman, Batman, and God.
He's certainly aligned with Jesus, which makes sense, and he brings up Jesus a lot in order to emphasize that he is on the good side of this situation. But he's also got some kind of love-hate relationship with Satan.
Yes, well, I mean, the way I see it, and it makes a weird kind of sense, is that God and the devil are present here, but are elsewhere. There is hell, and there is this heaven-adjacent Santa's workshop. But neither of these great forces can act. They have to act through servants. Mm-hmm. Santa and Merlin are servants to God, and Pitch is the devil's right-hand man.
Well, it kind of makes sense when you think about, especially Catholic theology, where you have a lot of intercessory saints that you can pray to. And already Santa is ostensibly drawn a lot from St. Nicholas. Mm-hmm. So it's fairly easy to turn him into kind of a demigod on Earth supporting God's plan, which is to get kids lots of wonderful toys.
Yeah, but no, it felt very Catholic to me, which again makes sense. And so there was a weird kind of consistent logic to this. Like it made a lot of sense that again we don't get the devil, we get one of the devils.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get God's direct interference. We have someone who is elevated. Santa's this kind of ancient being because he's alluded to being very old, but he's still younger than Pitch, implying that there's either a time before Santa or he's not the first Santa Claus. They don't really get into the rich mythos of K. Gordon Murray's Santa Claus.
Let's not pretend it is in any way internally coherent. Apparently these kids represent the countries they are from, but they've never eaten human food before.
That's my favorite part of this movie. And there's so many good parts. But my favorite part is when Pitch is summoned. And his punishment, if he fails in his Care Bears-like mission to bring evil upon the world through the hearts and minds of children, is that he will be fed nothing but ice cream, which is bad for his digestion. So Satan, the Prince of Darkness, the King of Evil, the Goat Master, the Prince of Lies, whatever, is basically threatening his number one agent. Upon price of failure, he will be force-fed ice cream and given the shits, basically. Pitch will have the runs for life if he doesn't bring some evil on Earth this Christmas. And that in a movie that is full of colorful, weird things, that might be the most colorful and weirdest of all.
That hell is lactose intolerant.
Mm-hmm. But also, Santa has weird dietary issues, too. It's I can only eat cloud food, which is just... What? I mean, I like the idea that he'll perish if he doesn't return home. That's kind of a cool little idea. But the idea that this giant man can't eat is this why clouds disappear? Is that Santa roams around like Galactus, chomping on clouds?
We should point out that this movie was very popular in Mexico, so it might have been responsible, at least partially, for the Santa Claus myth making inroads into Mexico. So from another link we can put in the show notes, Santa Claus is not as dominant during the Christmas holidays as you have in, say, the US and Canada. A lot of times the present giving responsibility is given to the three wise men from the original story of the birth of Jesus, which kind of makes sense because that's what they did, is they gave Jesus gifts. Not very good gifts, but gifts.
Yeah. Policemen often dress up as Melchior, Balthazar, and Gaspar, and they ride horses. Mm-hmm. But one thing that I found fascinating about this article is that what's listed as a movement away from Santa Claus in the 1930s. So Santa Claus already had his tentacles deep into Mexico in the early part of the 20th century. In the 1930s, there was a movement to replace Santa Claus with Quetzalcoatl. The pre-Hispanic plumed serpent god. And, of course, the star of the not-so-great movie Q, the Winged Serpent, in which Quetzalcoatl, in stop-motion glory, ends up sleeping, I think, on the Chrysler Building? Anyway, in the brief write-up that this gets in the article, the final sentence is, "This concept did not take."
One of my favorite things to say is from The Simpsons, Mr. Burns' line about Istapalapaketl.
Oh, yeah.
Cool! A big ugly head! Not just any big ugly head.
That has always been my favorite piece of Simpsons lore, you might want to call it, is that whenever they venture into that basement of theirs, whenever they would paint in the head, whenever that would be in the background, I would be delighted as a child, because that was always, because that's Rosebud, I think. That's when Maggie has Bobo.
Right.
And that was always one of my favorites. And that ending, as well as them trying to figure out a moral of the story, and Homer just decides, no, it's just a bunch of stupid stuff that happened. Might be my favorite thing.
Yeah, that's a really good episode.
Sadly, not a Christmas episode.
No.
Therefore, we must not talk about it.
No, it has to be banned. I mean, Bobo was a Christmas gift, I think, or maybe Mr. Burns. I remember Mr. Burns being taken away by his rich adoptive family at wintertime, but Lord only knows.
A lot of Citizen Kane happens around Christmas,
That's
at least in terms of there's a lot of snow and whatnot, so You could make the argument.
And so gather your family around with hot cocoa and watch Citizen Kane this Christmas. Fun for the whole family.
So it's basically kind of neck and neck between Santa and the three wise men in terms of who gives the kids the gifts in Mexico. But that's certainly not the case in all of Latin America. So if you wanted to learn more about who's getting your gifts, we'll have a link in the show notes.
Or check your local library. Da-da-da.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shadow 13.
It's time for Shadow 13, where we give you 13 quick facts about the episode. Let's go!
Rene Cardona worked on Santa Claus after his previous movie Tom Thumb became a surprise hit and even managed to attract distributors from America.
The movie was brought to American audiences by K. Gordon Murray, a film distributor who's also responsible for bringing the English world the Dreki, Robot vs. the Aztec Mummy.
Murray knew there was a thirst for more weird Santa Claus films and would distribute 4 others. Santa's Enchanted Village, Santa Claus and His Helpers, Santa's Magic Kingdom, and Santa's Fantasy Fair.
Whose narration is it anyway? The English direction is credited to Ken Smith, who is routinely credited as the narrator. Smith is said to be a pseudonym for K. Gordon Murray, but the IMDb adds to the confusion by crediting Murray and Amazing Colossal Man's Keith Heathering as the narrator.
The Spanish version of Santa Claus uses different takes of Santa at the organ during the Happy Global Sweatshop scenes. In the original, the announcer doesn't say the name of each country, and the country's cards are in Spanish.
Similarly, the scene where Pitch says curses and mutters gibberish profanity
Don't you ever do that again.
is silent in the Spanish version.
And so begins MST3K writer Paul Chaplin's appearances as Pitch, the Fey dancing demon in the host segments. He'd reprised the role for Season 6's San Francisco International, Season 7's Night of the Blood Beast, and Devil Doll in Season 8.
Kevin Murphy's Santa paraphrases John Carpenter's They Live in the final segment.
I'm here to eat candy canes and kick ass, and I'm all out of candy canes. Ha ha, come on.
The I've come to kick ass and chew bubblegum, lick candy canes, what have you, one-liner has been paraphrased in The Real Ghostbusters, Dazed and Confused, Mythbusters, and was even lifted wholesale for the video game Duke Nukem 3D.
The Nursing 1991 IV Drug Handbook, which Crow gives to Tom as a present, is still available from Amazon while supplies last. The annual guide for administering intravenous medicine is just as relevant now as it was in 1993 when this episode was released, and makes the perfect gift for the Misty in your life who has everything. Link in the show notes.
The episode is the source of the infamous Joikey, a sweater Gypsy started knitting for the other guy and finished as a Christmas gift for Mike. This coy reference to Joel Hodgson's then recent departure from the show sent some Misties ballistic.
Crow dubs the African children's performance the Ted Danson Comedy School, in reference to the notorious 1993 Friars roast of Whoopi Goldberg, held just 2 months before this episode aired. Goldberg, Danson's then-girlfriend, encouraged him to appear in blackface and drop the N-bomb during his part of the roast. It didn't go well. We'll put a link in our show notes to Roger Ebert's report of this fiasco.
People under 40, i.e. me, might not get the reference when Mike calls the Mads Yukon Cornelius and Hermie, but they're both characters from the 1964 stop-motion Christmas classic, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Full disclosure, I've never seen it. I hate stop-motion.
Full disclosure, I love stop-motion. You're crazy. Frank sells his beautiful hair to get Dr. F his gift, a reference to the O. Henry Groner Gift of the Magi, where a lady sells her hair to buy her man a watch fob, and in a shocking twist, he sells his watch to buy her some combs. Because nothing says happy holidays to the love of my life like some combs.
And that's time. This coy reference to Joel Hodgson's then recent departure from the show sent some Misties ballistic. Is that true?
Misty, yeah. They were super upset.
Yeah, although I actually tried to find quotes from it on Usenet, and searching for it I didn't find, but I did find some excerpts from it in the book, in the Peanut Gallery with MST3K, but there was nothing that was really worth quoting, so I didn't put
I
anything in there.
remember people on Usenet being upset, but
Why?
It's something I heard about a lot, but I didn't find any, like, when I searched for it, I didn't find it. Like, I searched for Joikey and nothing came up. I searched for 521 Santa Claus and, like, it didn't get referenced, even with, like, 90s era posts. So I couldn't find it, but people talk about it, so it must have happened.
It was because Gypsy says that other guy as if like they've already forgotten a few. Yeah, and this is only a few episodes after he's left.
I see.
Yeah, it was kind of salt on the wound.
All right.
And like they go into details in the book, and it's kind of, like it's interesting, but there was nothing like juicy. There was nothing really like kind of funny about it.
I thought it was a good reference to the fact that Gypsy does not have a lot of working RAM at any point, so she just forgot the guy's name as soon as he was out of her immediate vision.
Sure, or it could also be like
How hard
she
it is
doesn't
to
want
knit.
to be rude.
She has no
Yeah,
hands.
that too. Also, she's knitting sideways, which is very tricky.
So, listeners might have noticed that we're not talking about a lot. We're mostly focusing on Santa and Christmas, and honestly, that's because there hasn't been a lot to talk about with this episode. You want to talk about Lupita? She's cute. She's like 3.
She's adorable.
She's really young. Like, I was looking at her and she's like, she can't be older than 3 or 4. It's a really young kid to have in this as your, like, starring kid. But anyway, that's all I have to say about that. Cute. Remarkably young.
Yep.
Doesn't seem to know how to smile. That's all right.
And yet still steals scenes from the Jamie Farr-esque devil.
Exactly. Well, maybe let's talk about our own Christmas traditions, because we are both raised Christian, but I have to imagine there's been some difference in how that went on. For instance, you believe that Santa Claus had the power to be invisible.
That's what I was told. I'll be honest, I was always something of a skeptic when it came to Santa Claus.
Me too.
Yeah, it's, you know, being told about the Tooth Fairy, being told about Santa Claus, being told about the Easter Bunny, I assume as a child, I must have been like, oh boy, wonder, sure. But I remember very quickly going, no, this can't be real. But it's fun to play along because I was genuinely terrified that if I said I don't believe in the Tooth Fairy, I don't believe in Santa Claus, I would stop receiving gifts and money.
Yeah.
My truest desire.
For me, I keyed into the idea that there might not be a Santa Claus pretty young. When I was like 4 or 5, I was really nuts about My Little Ponies. And I really wanted one of their houses, which was like either the Dream Castle or the Paradise Estate. And this was probably about 5 or 6 years into when My Little Ponies first really hit. So all of their first generation ephemera was no longer on the market. And I just remember I was having a bath and Mom was like, you know, Santa might not be able to find your choice. I was like, that's impossible. He's Santa Claus. He's magic. And lo and behold, on Christmas Day, the things I asked for weren't there. So that started my skepticism. I kept on it until I was 8. And I think the only reason for that is I remember waking up one night to go to the bathroom or something, and I heard Santa going, ho, 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 how are you? And my parents were like, pretty good, Santa. And they don't remember this. And in retrospect, they must have just gotten a friend that was over to pretend to be Santa because they heard me shuffling around upstairs. But that gave me enough doubt for me not to be like openly skeptical for a few years longer than otherwise. And then I just realized that Santa Claus's handwriting was the exact same as my mom's and called her on it, and she just told me not to tell my younger sister.
Okay, I was the baby of the family, so that was never something I had to worry about. But I remember, I think the first time perhaps that it was really cemented for me that there is no Santa Claus is that I remember getting plastic ninja weapons when I was a kid. I got these like plastic throwing stars and like a little plastic sword and everything. And I remember thinking, one, I asked for real ninja weapons and a black outfit with a bandana that said ninja on it. And I received none of these things. And I was like, the real Santa would have brought me goddamn weapons. Money and weapons. That's all I ask for. Listen, I've always just wanted to rule a small nation with an iron fist like most children want. It's a phase you go through.
It's really funny, too, because after that, I embraced skepticism, and I thought the idea of kind of this mass fooling of our young children was not a great idea. I've become a little bit more nuanced about that, but I have a 3-year-old right now, and I really do not know what to tell her. Luckily, she doesn't seem that interested yet, so I haven't had to like really figure it out, but I don't know what I'm going to do when she comes home talking about Santa.
Yeah, because you don't exactly want to tell your child, oh, Santa Claus, that's just for dumb children. I get you your I get you your presents. Your parents get you your presents. Yeah, I don't know how you would handle as a parent where you would learn to stop worrying about Santa and love the bomb. I'm not sure how I would handle that problem.
If anyone who's listening out there has any ideas on how to do this, my working idea is that it's one of those Batman things where we all...
Where you tell your child Batman is real?
No, but, that ability for kids to believe and not believe. Like, we all know Batman doesn't really exist, but we all love Batman, and if we see him on the streets, we're going to be like, hey, it's Batman, awesome, Yeah, yeah, sure. I remember just gathering around the tree, leaving out pictures of parents for Batman. And I don't know, he would leave you a criminal who has been tied up with his batarang. Hopefully, Burgess Meredith as the Penguin. I nearly said Burgess Meredith. Thank you.
So Lupita. Getting back to Lupita, she was in another film,
Batman Begins,
that was also directed by Rene Cardona. That came out the same year, called El Sordo, which means the deaf man.
Oh.
Maybe it's about Grumpus.
I cannot tell. There's no plot summary on IMDb. Her last name is Quesadas, which is the same last name as the actor who played Pedro.
Yeah, they're brother and sister.
Yeah, they're brother and sister. Oh. Pedro was in many other movies, it turns out, up until the 70s.
He could at least pretend to have an expression other than sad. So I could see why he would be the breakout star.
So Pedro was was Santa's helper boy?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. He was also in 1962. He was in a movie called Chico o Chica, which basically means boy or girl, which I like to think of as
Glenn or Glenda.
Yes, that's exactly where I was going with that.
Though I should say that was also one of my favorite running jokes in this episode is the idea that Pedro is a super ambitious go-getter who's trying to replace Santa. This will all be mine someday.
Oh man, everything about the setup in this movie is just such a treat. And again, the Mike and the Bots, they make hay with it, and it's a lot of fun. I love all the scenes with Santa's workshop and Santa's weird mythos about his celestial city, the bottled city of candor that he lives in. It's amazing. But you did have a time in which you believed in Santa or just kind of went along with it. And I guess the best possible solution is to say, to maybe leave it up to your kid, maybe? You can just say, it's like, well, no one really knows if Santa's real or not, but presents show up under the tree and they're signed from Santa, so who's going to do it? And just kind of leave it to them? Because that was always, like I said, I always felt like I was in a weird contract with my parents where it's like, I have to keep going along with this or I won't get Sonic 2 for Christmas.
I like that it was, I won't get Sonic 2 and not, I'll disappoint my parents.
No, fuck them. What have they done for me?
Got you presents.
Nothing.
Yeah.
That was also how it worked in my family, where when I sussed to the idea, my mother basically said, well, if you stop believing in it, then he'll stop bringing you presents. And I was like, all right, fine.
Oh my gosh.
He threw a sleigh bell out the window and you're like, I wish we were from a Jewish family. Hanukkah Harry is totally real.
I do like latkes.
Like latkes, don't like latke gratis. Of course, the real joy and the real meaning of Christmas is, of course, the presents that you received. And I can't help but wonder, like, we grew up in the 1980s and the 1990s, and you could still get questionable toys on the market. I assume there's still dangerous things being peddled to kids right now, but there was sometimes a sense that you could poke your eye out with the things you received, and that was part of the fun.
That one scene in the movie really brought this to mind, where Pitch is looking out the window to wait for Santa to come, and Santa sets a cannon on fire and pinches him in the butt with what basically looks like a pointy rocket, but it basically is some kind of gunpowder powered toy.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that was actually something that existed in the 50s, and it did. First of all, kids got pellet guns, but there was a toy that used actual gunpowder and had basically an explosive in it that kids could get their hands on. So I just get the sense that, well, first of all, it was a less litigious age, but there was a sense that kids grew up a little bit faster back then, and sometimes you just, you'll lose an eye in the process of growing up. It's just what you can expect.
But I don't know, losing an eye can be helpful. It worked out for Odin.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, the original Santa Claus. He got wisdom. Although I'd like to think that the only thing he learned was, I wish I had 2 eyes. I shouldn't have done that.
But no, I had pretty protective parents, and the stuff I was always interested in, were My Little Ponies. There's nothing pointy about them.
Fair enough. I didn't receive anything too dangerous. I mean, see plastic ninja weapons. Although my grandfather did carve out of wood wooden guns for my brother and I.
Oh, nice.
That even though you could not load them, and they looked like old rifles, we clubbed each other with these things routinely. Like, my brother kept all of his toes, but my God, I clocked him in the temple something fierce one day.
That does remind me, yes, we did. It wasn't a present, but we had a wooden croquet set, and I did at one point take that croquet to my younger sister's head.
Nice. Family. Now, I have to confess, like, when you hear about these older toys, like, you're a little bit jealous because the idea of real palpable danger as a kid is kind of funny and exciting. And I remember just like, I get this twinge for a thing I didn't get whenever I watch the movie A Christmas Story, where of course he wants that pellet gun, the BB gun, and he might shoot his eye out. And I was always kind of jealous of that and all of the potentially dangerous child toys that you could receive, even pre-80s. And one that was still kind of around when I was a kid, but has since been discontinued to my knowledge, is moon shoes, which were these tiny little springboarded shoes that would be, they were basically like purple Crocs with yellow straps that you could just basically bound with every step, to simulate being on the moon, I guess. And I always wanted one of those, even though I would always see kids falling over on pavement whenever they were wearing them, because it's like, man, I'd love to be in a jam and I'm running in and I'm in a dark alley and there's a huge brick wall, but I can just put on my moon boots and escape. But I think what I was really pining for was a life of adventure and not suburban boredom.
Right. I was actually looking through some of the more surprising toys from Christmas past. And there are a lot of guns. But what I found particularly interesting is the Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab.
Yeah, I had a glance at this one myself. It looks fantastic, but wasn't one of the dangers that you would burn yourself horribly?
Probably, because it looks like you're actually doing lab work. Like it's a full out. And I would recommend anybody who's interested to go look, because the graphic design is like something straight out of Fallout. In fact, this concept is straight out of Fallout.
Yeah, we'll have a link in our show notes.
It actually had like U-238 natural uranium. So you got natural uranium and some other isotopes that did give off radiation, not very much. Nothing that was particularly dangerous unless you ingested it, which of course children will do. Mm-hmm. Especially they had polonium-210, which was used to poison Alexander Litvinenko. It is very dangerous stuff. If it is ingested, like it can kill hundreds of people with just like a little speck of it. So, but kids need to learn about science.
Yeah, from the makers of Little Johnny's asbestos eating kit.
I mean, obviously it was probably meant for older kids, and as I said, like most of the radiation is not a problem unless you ingest it. But it's still not something like you want to trust children with.
No.
I could just see a bully like forcing some kid to eat this stuff. So, Adam, this is one of my favorite things to watch during the Christmas holidays. Are there any other Christmas specials that you like to watch on repeat during the holidays?
Oh, sure. I mean, like I enjoy the original MST3K Christmas specials, but I think my greatest Christmas special of all is the Pee-wee's Playhouse Christmas special, now on Netflix.
Oh, I've never seen it.
Oh, it's amazing. I remember as a kid, I was a devoted Playhouse kid, and I remember being so excited, and I remember it totally living up to expectations. And apparently, the special was created only because Big Top Pee-wee was a huge failure. The follow-up Pee Wee Herman movie in which he loses his virginity in a questionable story. It does feature Benicio del Toro, though, in his first speaking role as a dog-faced man. Anyway, the Pee-wee's Playhouse Christmas special has everything you could possibly want. Homoeroticism, the Del Rubio triplets, and songs by Katie Lang.
Whoa.
Yeah. Whoopsie Goldberg shows up. Oprah Winfrey's there to wish Pee-wee happy Christmas. And it's, I think, the only episode where they venture into Puppet Land.
Oh.
Which, of course, Miss Yvonne, the most beautiful woman and only woman in Puppet Land, is from. And it's great. It's super fun. There is, as you are more prone to notice as an adult than as a child, if you are me, the loving close-ups of Ricardo the pool boy, the ever-present shirtless pool boy in all of Pee-wee's Playhouse. But it's a delight from start to finish, and it's really, really sweet. There's a great stop-motion penny cartoon about Christmas, and there's another great stop-motion bit in which the dinosaur family that lives in the mouse hole in Pee-wee's Playhouse celebrate Hanukkah. It's super sweet. There's some great songs, and it's a great star-studded epic of its time.
You know, it's funny that you like Pee-wee's Playhouse and the special in particular, because this movie I thought had a very Pee-wee's Playhouse vibe, especially in the Cloud Castle, like all of the mouth machine and all of the weird eye extensions.
Maybe not the mouth machine. No, the mouth machine is very Pee-wee.
It has the same kind of like weird and wrong kind of fun kind of vibe that you get with Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Hybrid combos of human and machine and furniture.
Yeah, well, as I said before, it's like Santa Claus in this movie is equal parts Pee-wee Herman, Batman, and God.
Nice. For me, for my Christmas special, that's a tougher one, because the ones that I want to watch the most, that give me the most familiar feeling, are not. I wouldn't recommend them to people. I just like to live in their houses.
Oh, what?
As you know, I'm kind of really I'm really drawn to interiors and set designs, and the two Christmas specials that I like to watch the most, which is Home Alone and National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, they both take place in these really, really nice, beautifully decorated 80s houses. And I just like to luxuriate in every single like shot I can get of them. Because especially the Home Alone house, that's a nice house. And I really like how they decorate it. And so I sometimes look out for pointers in the future if I can ever afford a house of my own. In fact, that particular house was on the market not so long ago in Chicago, and it was only like, a solid mil, which, if you live in Toronto, you're like, what? That's chump change. What are you talking about? So, yeah, I just like to be in those houses kind of through the magic of movies. And because it has that one line from National Lampoon, Merry Christmas! Shitter's full!
And doesn't Home Alone also have a similarly quotable line of Merry Christmas, you filthy animal?
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, Home Alone is a good movie. National Lampoon, I like it, but I wouldn't say it's aged well. All of your faves are problematic.
Yeah, and there's nothing problematic about Macaulay Culkin.
Or Chevy Chase.
But I remember really liking Home Alone because it was usually so it was so atypically like unsentimental. Like, yes, there's sentiment in it. It is very much a Christmas movie, and the scary old man turns out to be the sweetest man of all. Mm-hmm. There's lots of good stuff in it. It like most John Hughes movies has a great John Candy scene.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, it does.
Yeah, and as a child, I absolutely loved the slapstick violence that accompanied the Wet Bandits scene.
Of course, you did.
And everybody wanted to be cool like Kevin. It was a great movie for a child. I have not watched it since it was re-released in the summer, I think the following year of its theatrical release. And it was not summer, but it was sometime during the school year because we were taken out of class to see it.
Classic.
Yeah.
It's close to the holidays. We're not teaching you anymore.
Mm-hmm. I remember as a kid enjoying the Wet Bandits slapstick so much, thinking it's like, man, if they ever make another Turtles movie, they need to cast Daniel Stern and Joe Pesci as Bebop and Rocksteady.
Well, I'd recommend returning to it. It's still a pretty good movie, if only because now you can probably appreciate Catherine O'Hara's performance from a different light.
Well, she's great and not given enough to do, and something I definitely appreciate from as a lifelong fan of SCTV. Again with the Candy connection, but I also have a real love of character actor Roberts Blossom, who plays the creepy old man. Yeah, he's a terrific actor, and he's in Escape from Alcatraz, and he's in a great little movie about Ed Gein called Deranged, and so he's like perfectly cast in that movie. One more Christmas special I think worth mentioning, and I think you would like this one, despite your hatred of stop motion, is Abed's Uncontrollable Christmas from Community.
Oh, yeah, well, if it's got a little tongue-in-cheek version of stop motion, I think I can handle it.
Yeah, that's something myself and my old roommates from Newfoundland, we would watch every year following, its debut in Community's second season, and it's genuinely pretty affecting. Like, I don't think I can watch the That's What Christmas Is For or hear Annie's line about, the longest and darkest nights bringing people together without getting a little misty-eyed.
Aw.
Yeah, it's a real sweet special. It's really nice. Well, I know that we haven't been receiving that many letters. They've all gone to Santa in big bags, but surely something has come through to shower down on your face there, Chris, in the production booth. Has anyone sent us a letter this Christmas?
Our littlest listener, Lupita from Guadalajara, asks, what do you, Adam and Beth, want for Christmas?
Second Halloween.
I want to not be cold anymore.
Inside and out.
Yeah.
Motion to rename Christmas John Carpenter's Halloween 2.
This is a very drafty house. I would love some way to make it not happen. Barring that, some nice pajamas, perhaps.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you know anything about Mexican Christmas celebrations, or if you'd like to wish Beth and Adam a happy ho-ho-ho, get in touch with us. Find our Facebook group. It's super pleasant, really. Or we're on Twitter at It Is Just a Show. We'd love to hear from you. It's Just a Show is a podcast from Megaphonic FM. Find all our fancy little shows at megaphonic.fm. Thanks again to all our Patreon supporters. You can support It's Just a Show and access some superfan holiday bonus bits by going to itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today on It's Just a Show, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/19.
Can I just cut in here?
Sure.
So, do you want to know what was the most common way of dying in a car accident before they start putting in safety standards?
Merry Christmas, yes.
Steering wheel impalement.
Yay!
Oh, that's brutal. I love it.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Woo!
Why was there never a Hellraiser movie in which somebody has a steering wheel in their chest? That would have been ruled. That would have been so good.
You have to look for 1940s Hellraiser.
Nice.
Well, I mean, that I think brings us to the end. We finished our nog. We've recorded our Christmas special. And this, of course, prompts the question. What special thing do we have awaiting us in the new year?
A little Christmas poem for you. G is for the giant turtle in my heart. A is for a giant turtle in my heart. M is for the monster who is giant in my heart. E is for everyone who keeps this monster in their heart. R is for raw turtle meat, which surrounds his giant heart. And A is for a friend to all children. Our next episode will be Season 3, Episode 4, Gamera versus Baragon.
Yay! I've been waiting for this. And we're going to be watching this for a very, very special January. Or Gamuary.
Can't wait. Of all the kaiju, he is the closest in our hearts.
Well, I don't know. My heart has like equal living spaces for Godzilla and Gamera, and of course Gigan, the weird Godzilla monster who has knives for hands, a buzzsaw on his belly, and a weird Geordie LaForge visor.
It's like someone from Japan looked into Adam's fever dreams and invented a monster based on them.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard, Beth, but these Gamera movies, they're weird. But yes, that, I guess, leaves us with this, our final episode for the year of It's Just a Show. So, I wish to both my co-host and producer a happy holidays, and incidentally, a happy holidays to all of you at home.
Very happy holidays to all of you out there.
All right, I'll give you one more try.
That's how you'd say it if you were the Ex Machina robot. Now, what would a human say, Beth?
Adam, Chris, it's been a great joy doing this podcast with you, and I hope for many more in the future. Until then, enjoy Christmas with your families or whatever it is that you do.
Wonderful. I hope every one of our listeners had a lovely holiday season, and I hope to see the two of you in person off pod real soon. Meanwhile, take it away, Theme Squad.
Oh, Santa Claus, that's just for dumb children.